Welcome to the Circle of Birth podcast. I'm your host and advocate, Ali Kranz. These podcasts are here to gather stories, people and information to better our understanding of the wisdom of birth and how we can reclaim our connections to birth from conception and beyond. You will hear stories not only from Australia but from all over the world, bringing together women, partners, midwives, doulas and all the people that have a birth story to share. So jump right in for this next Circle of Birth story. Welcome so much to episode 25. Today we have Elena Tonetti, and she is from Birth into Being. And I must say, this episode has taken me a while to put together. Mostly I've listened to this quite a few times. So in my own personal birth journey, I completely connected with Elena and her work. Watching her movie while pregnant, that is Birth as We Know It, it just blew my hormones to a new level. I was just absolutely connected and ready, and found that in my own birth I intuitively tapped into the spiraling like some sort of warrior goddess. So in this episode you'll hear about Elena's own personal journey as in Russia as being a young activist, and then meeting the great Igor Charkovsky, where she was told that if we want to change the way we live on this planet, we need to change the way we make people. So from here you'll hear how special Elena's story is and how our programming really plays out into our own stories. Okay, hi Elena, welcome so much, and thank you for joining the Circle of Birth podcast to come and share your journey into the somewhat unbelievably amazing work that you are doing worldwide. And I would just be absolutely honoured if you could share with us your journey for the next hour for us. So thank you and welcome.
And thank you. It's a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to speak with your audience. Wonderful. About my journey, my goodness, I'm going to be 60 very soon. So the journey was very long. When I was young, living in Russia, I was always involved with some kind of movement, trying to figure out how to make life better. And in 1982, all my political activism kind of came to a halt because I stumbled into this amazing man, Igor Charkovsky, who pioneered water birth. And it was kind of a meeting and bypassing, but he invested 4 hours into trying to explain to me how the way we're born is correlated with the low quality of life that we have. And because that was my kind of primary focus, I was really listening to him. What he was saying was that if we want to change the way we live on this planet, we need to change the way we make people, because the way we make people kind of is a setup for people not being able to have common sense and enough compassion to create a society that is based on justice. You know, amazing as it sounds, there is now a huge body of research in the field of prenatal psychology that undoubtedly proves that correlation. That if a person was created in a stressful environment, then the basic settings in the nervous system are kind of wired to perceive the world as uncomfortable, stress-generating place. The world by itself doesn't have that stress level. It's in our perception, it's in the lenses that we acquire during the formative period when we are being built from our mother's juices inside her womb, building our little bodies from the chemistry that the mother is providing. And if she was really stressed out, if she had like not very comforting relationship with the father of the baby, if she was not in the right relationships with herself, with the world, with her parents, it generates a very specific chemistry inside her body and inside her womb. So we kind of absorb it when we're building our limbs and our organs, and then we translate the world as a place of scarcity or kind of lack of safety. So anybody who has access to internet can find all the research available plentifully. So when I, in my younger days in 84, when I realized that there is correlation between our attitude towards our planet Earth and our birth, I stopped everything and dedicated most of my time and attention and energy into this part of life, helping women give birth well. So my own birth was leaving a lot to be desired for better. I was born like any other Russian person in a state institution that was inhumane. It was practicing really brutal, bizarre delivery methods that women were absolutely terrified of, to the point that women in Russia had only one child because nobody in their right mind wanted to go back there. The rate of abortions in my mother's generation was 23 per person on average. This is really bizarre. Gosh. Yeah, it's like jaw-dropping number. And it's for that same reason, because life was so strange. You know, it's like I would withdraw from negative terms, but it just was very hard. And bringing a child into that was not a very desirable experience, because you have to actually put that child somewhere. And the apartments were so tiny that most of the people didn't have literally physically a place to put the child. So that is in my mother's generation, and it was translating into my generation. I was born in the 50s in Siberia. It was, hard winters, and you can't really live homeless like in India or somewhere in the tropics. So we were bound to our living quarters, and all of the experiences were kind of stemming from that. On top of that, babies were taken away for 5 days from the mother. So the mother would see her child for the very first time 5 days after giving birth.
What was the reasoning for that one, Elena?
No, there is no reasoning for anything. That's exactly the thing. It's just done because that's how it's done.
And was a lot of this male-driven in Russia at that time?
Of course, only male-driven. The women didn't have much power at all. And that's the life in the country. The way the social structure was created also didn't have any logic, any reason. It just was done because that's how it was done, and to the point that you don't even question any of that. So in 82, when Igor Charkovsky was mentioning alternative ways of birthing, he was considered a madman. There was actually a lot of attempts to put him in the mental institution, because who in their right mind would put a laboring woman in the water, right? It was completely crazy idea. And he was running with it since 1962, when he had kind of semi-water birth with his daughter. I mean, his wife had it. I have a lot of information about it on my website, birthintobeing.com, but I am putting kind of a telegram style to describe the situation from which my work sprouted. I heard him I realized that what he was saying, that if we create a very blurry formative period for a whole generation, then that generation will have a very blurry quality of life, for lack of a better word. And if we want to have some clarity in thinking, in our approach to our life force, we need to bring some clarity into the formative period. And he was very assertive in the way, stressing that it's not just limited to birth, not just about how we're born. It's all formative period, which means from the moment of conception, including the quality of conception, throughout 9 months of gestation, the birth itself included, of course, but then it's also for the first few years of life, until the child has a strong sense of identity, strong sense of self. That's when we stop accepting everything around us personally and start censoring what is me, what is not me. And I'm not putting any specific age on that not any specific number, because for different people it happens at a different age. Some people click into their true identity very early in age, and some people actually never do. No matter how old they get, they still live on autopilot, according to some kind of external conditioning and programming. They never develop that true identity. So, but technically speaking, we get a sense of self on average between ages like 5 and 10. Given the wider scope of all kinds of situations, but most of us within the normal settings, when we're not living in a life-threatening, completely bizarre environment, at some point when our frontal lobes start forming, by age 10, we really have a way of discerning what is me and what are my likes and dislikes, what I want, who I am. So until then, we are like sponges absorbing all the sensory experiences from the environment and adopting it as a norm, as our own experiences. So, for example, if our parents are in conflict, we're accepting conflict as norm, as our interpretation of love, because we're always expecting a notion of love when we arrive to this planet. It's our natural state. So whatever we experience becomes our understanding of love.
So it's almost like in utero, we're in a state of hypnosis or absorbing all the mother's environment. The baby comes out and it continues in that state, the sponge-like hypnotic state, until it's about 7 or 10.
It would be like basic settings in the nervous system when stress is considered the norm. And it's a very difficult groove to go against, because later in life we might want to work with it, understand it, but those basic settings set up before we developed cortex, the part of the brain that is responsible for understanding. So no matter how much we understand why it is that way, it's not going to change the basic settings. They are established in the limbic part of the brain, in the reptilian part of the brain. Limbic is our emotional center, and reptilian brain is the center governing our physiology. So if we have those basic settings in our physiology and in our emotional center, we can't really think our way out of those basic settings. That's the trick. It can explain to us why we are full of anxiety and phobias, but it's not going to help us change it. It's really a thing that I wish more people would understand, because talking about things rarely can help free the person from that anxiety. So in order to give birth well, we need to go back into connecting with that part of our being that is purely physiological and purely emotional, also almost bypassing the cognitive part of the expressing our creativity. So in order to really shift the dynamic, we need to move the energy in the body. So this is where I came to the understanding of what's effective in healing our birth trauma, in neutralizing the way it's impacting us. It was through the understanding that unless we work with raw emotions and physiology, then we remain symptomatic. But only working with emotions and physiology was also not very effective, because our thinking part is a huge part of our expression of life, right? So you can't really disown it. You can't let it lead the process, but you can't leave it outside entirely, completely too. So what the effectiveness of any healing modality is when you activate evenly at the same time all three parts of the brain: the cortex, the limbic, and the reptilian brain, responsible for mental, emotional, and physiological part. So that's what I love doing and keep bringing to people who come to my classes.
So it's almost like tapping into that creativity part of your brain, and especially if you were pregnant coming into birth, that's the part of the brain that needs to engage with the reptilian or the primal side of your being. And
Exactly.
If we're thinking in the system model or the subconscious model, then we're engaging in like fight or flight, and we're not allowing ourselves to shift that energy. Is that similar to?
Well, it expresses itself differently with different people. For example, if a woman cannot get pregnant, sometimes it's the cortex that is holding her back from getting pregnant, because she would be ripe and ready, but her cortex is thinking that, well, I need to first find finish the university, find the right man, and I am just not in the right place, and her cognitive part could be really sabotaging conception. Or sometimes reptilian part that is still in shock from her birth trauma, from her own experience of being born. And with her heart, with her emotions, she would be craving to have a baby, longing to have, to become a mother, with, being in love with somebody. She just wants it. But her reptilian brain might be completely terrified by this idea and refusing to fertilize the egg, because basically giving birth is a reptilian function. Sometimes women in a coma can get pregnant and even gestate the baby full term when the cortex is completely out and it's only physiology, the reptilian brain is functioning. So getting pregnant is not possible if the body is still in shock from the woman's own birth. And we have so much of it these days. In the United States, it's 32% infertility right now in the appropriate age category. And what I see, that when women neutralize their own birth trauma, they're able to conceive naturally without even any intervention, because you just need to make peace with the body that will be in charge of doing the doing during pregnancy.
Essentially, we've just become very subconscious thinkers, and then when we're governed by systems that tell us how to birth or how to run our bodies, in a sense that we're clogging up those channels, aren't we, for humanity, where the healing is taking so long to accomplish, and we really need to clear those channels so that we can tap into that creativity mind, that primal mind.
Well, exactly. And creativity can also be expressed from different parts of us. Either we're expressing creativity from that stifled, contracted place, or we're expressing creativity from aligned, harmonious place of unity and connection with the source of all life. These are completely different products of our creativity, and they resonate with people on a different level. So creativity by itself is very good, but what is it actually delivering into our mass mentality? That's a whole other piece. And in order for us to allow that creative flow be full and generously transmitting the amazing joy of life and our capacity to love, we actually need to be able to tap into that capacity, because to love is exactly that. There is either capacity to love or the absence of that capacity, which forms during those early days and years of our life. And this is basically why we see so little of it. The true ability to love fearlessly in that primal mode of connection with the universe, that kind of love. Not just falling in love with somebody, which is sometimes the opposite of being able to love, because it comes from hormones, comes from this hunger.
Desire.
Right, desire. It's like falling in love is, I have this life force that needs to run over something. Give me something. It comes from hunger, really. And love, in this sense of unconditional love, is coming from a desire to feed, in that analogy. Not to eat, but to feed somebody else. You know what I mean? It's really kind of different frequencies. And that ability to experience love with a capital letter, to really open and surrender and trust, and not even having to be attached to love what. It's not an objectified state of being. It's completely universal. It's just the ability to love everything around you. And from that place, the oxytocin flows. You can give birth, you can conceive, you can not conceive if you decide that that's not what you want to do with your life, and your babies will be your books, your gardens, your community, your life as a masterpiece. It doesn't have to be motherhood. Sometimes creativity wants to take a different form, and motherhood is the opposite of that. We're all very different. It's not necessarily that a woman has to have a child. A woman is also a person that can have any form of expression of her life force, but she also has the ability to give birth to a baby. So, but that choice needs to be made from that place of alignment with her true identity, not from just going on autopilot. It's my biological clock ticking. I have to have a child now. So it's a big source of complications during pregnancy when a woman is having a baby, not really connecting with the soul of this baby on this deep pre-incarnational spiritual level. So, but this is, of course, if you look at the bigger picture, we need to first come to a place of being able to look at the bigger picture. How do we do that if we're not taught in schools, if our mothers did not role model it to us, if nobody is talking about it? How do we come to that place of conscious conception if we don't even know that we can be conscious in the first place, right? But then what else do we have to do? We have to start somewhere. So just one foot in front of the other, no matter where we start, whether we start this journey to self-realization early in life or at the last trimester of pregnancy, or when our children are already having their own children, it's better late than never. And from my understanding, working with thousands of people all over the world, there is no such thing as too late. We can start wherever we are right now, no matter what happened before, because we are not what happened to us. This is the kind of the fork in the road where we can choose identifying ourselves, continuing to identify ourselves with our original limbic imprint during our formative period, with all the trauma that it accumulated, with all the hardships and heartbreaks that we experience, or we can kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, this has all happened. Okay, this is my history, but I am not what happened to me. There is a me to whom this all was happening, and that me is so much bigger than any of that. And from that place, I can make a decision whether I am continuing with this conditioned kind of identity, or I choose to really make space for my intimate connection with the source from which I came, and with that impulse of my spirit to embody and walk the earth at this time on this planet and recover the memory of what followed that impulse, like what created that impulse in the first place. Why did I answer the call of this planet at this time? From everything we know about creating the body is that there shouldn't be any bodies on this planet, because it's such a complex process. It's such an unlikely event. It's a very complex chain of events, creation of the body, that are absolutely cannot happen randomly by just electrons bumping into each other. The fact that you were conceived and born and still alive to have this conversation, it means that there was an incredible guidance of your soul and your spirit in order for you to be able to stay alive all this time. And we need to tap into that impulse of the soul and the spirit to be on this planet. And when we connect with that bigger picture of what brought us to this earth, then all of a sudden, all the limitations caused by the trauma experienced during, our beginning of life, it just kind of takes its place. It becomes much smaller. It doesn't have the dominant driving power to create and call circumstances in our life. We just stay focused on the bigger picture and how we fit together with all the other beautiful souls and spirits that came here to this earth to make it a better place, because there is no other calling that we would answer.
It's really interesting. I'm just reflecting, like listening to your words in my own personal journey of becoming aware and healing. And I know that there's so much more that I need to learn and listen. And especially since doing these podcasts, I've transformed hugely. And just feeling of me, that person back when the fog lifted and the haze started coming away and I started becoming more self-aware, I found that consciousness was coming to me in all forms. I was conscious of the food I was looking at that was going into my mouth, the water that I was drinking, and the growth into that consciousness was just completely not linear or limited to time or space. It was just like you were saying, that universal concept of love was coming to me. And tapping into that from moment to moment, it's just that. It's universal. It's love, and it's love in its wholeness. And I find now that I've come to a space with the healing and the awareness where the consciousness of, a day-to-day thing like putting something into your mouth has slowed down a lot for me. That when prior I was living in this sort of suppression, this haze, this fog, and feeling that now that I'm understanding that the universe is sort of providing this right time and space for me to do things that I need to, and not having that feeling of I have to get everything done now and it's too late, and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, exactly. The edge leaves. That living on the edge, experience of high stress, it just melts away because you just all of a sudden relax into being who you are. That's exactly what the flood of oxytocin feels like when you are in this harmonious awareness that you're in the right place at the right time, that everything is unfolding perfectly, even though it doesn't look like it doesn't feel like it sometimes. But the more you drop into that space of surrender and acceptance, you get bigger and you get more and more spacious, and you see the bigger picture and how all the bits and pieces and all the people in your life, how they all fit together. And some of them are here to support you and love you up and lift you up. And some of the people are there to mirror different bits and pieces where you are still contracted and where you are still full of anxieties. I'm not saying anything new. You probably heard the words, but one thing is to hear the words, and another thing is to actually get that feeling, now I understand what the words mean.
Yeah.
It's a difference between looking the picture of tropical island on the photograph or being on that tropical island.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Elena, can we talk a little, I know in my personal birth journeys recently, 1 year ago, watching Birth as We Know It and becoming completely absorbed into your work. And from that, in my birth experience, I really resonated with the spiraling and my learnings of sacred geometry, and it was just absolutely mind-blowing during my birth, and it fitted so well. But one thing I'm really interested in, if you'd like to talk about briefly, is the project that you undertook with the birth camps. How did you even begin that, considering the issues that Russia was facing at the time with expressing these sort of methods? And how did you come into that journey? And if you could talk a bit about it, that'd be wonderful.
The thing about the mess Russia was in, there were no rules against it. There was no restrictions and no license required, so we were free to do whatever we wanted to do because there was no prohibiting laws. When I moved to America in 1989 and wanted to continue doing what I was doing in Russia, I ran into all kinds of limitations because I was told that I would instantly find myself in jail if I tried to do something like that in America. And in Russia, because it was not part of the description of the world, there was no rules against that. So when we realized that we need to go to the Black Sea to take pregnant women there, just because we were learning to meditate at that time, heard of such thing. It was all new. It was late 70s, early 80s in Russia. All the information about Western traditions was just seeping through. And we thought that trying to meditate was a good idea. And somehow pregnant women had a really easy access to really deep meditations. Igor was explaining that it was due to their bodies being in such kind of lucid states. The body of the pregnant woman is really the most flexible, resilient physical form, because all the systems are in the process of constant rearranging of itself. So a pregnant woman is able to accomplish enormous heights of spiritual experiences during pregnancy because all her hormonal landscape and her physiology are so receptive to the impulses and desires and kind of her guidance. So when these pregnant women were going into deep states of meditation, they were coming back with the same stories that they were seeing dolphins swimming around them in this kind of etheric plane, that somehow the human babies were somehow telepathically connected with that species of dolphins. And you have to understand, if you're living on the coast in Australia, dolphins are part of the description of the world, right? Dolphins are everywhere. There's symbols, jewelry, pictures. It's part of your reality. In Moscow, in deep winter, in the 80s, dolphins were not on the radar. It was just, another kind of fish. And they were treated that way by Russian fisheries. They were not considered anything other than fish. And all of a sudden, seeing dolphins and having this consistent description from so many women was catching attentions. Like, why dolphins? Why would pregnant women, all without talking to each other, describe that they're seeing dolphins? So when there was enough of that, at some point there was an obvious next kind of, let's go try going to the Black Sea when it's summer and see if we can increase the quality of meditations if we would be in the close physical proximity to dolphins. So that's basically how the first idea of the birth camp arrived, out of this noticing the pattern shared by so many pregnant women. It was just pure curiosity, and why not? why not go to the water in the summer? So the first expedition was arranged, and there were so many miracles happening in that year, and then the next year, it was just, there was no way of stopping it. Well, there was, because it was stopped finally. There was a really big oil spill in that lagoon where all the birth camps were, but also perestroika started, the economy fell apart, the whole world fell apart basically in Russia. So it's, when you have a war at your doorstep, you don't really think about remodeling the house, right? You just are on survival level. You're just trying to stay alive. So 90s were very, very difficult in Russia, and it kind of died out. And by then, in the 2000, in this millennia, then Russia caught up with all the rules, regulations, and licenses, and completely prohibited home birth, water birth. It's like none of that can happen. So we had this a short window of opportunity in second half of the 80s. Well, we started talking about birth camps in 82, but the first camp actually happened in 86. It took a while for us to organize it and get it all together. So the first baby was born in the Black Sea in 86, and the last camp was in 92. So it wasn't a very long story. And also, we didn't have a camera for a long time. So the footage that you see in the movie is only because there was a foreign midwife that came to study with us and left the camera behind. When she was leaving, she took the tapes and left the camera. So until then, we didn't even know anybody who would have a camera. We didn't have any evidence, any images of all the births that were happening, and which is really a great loss. But what you see in Birth as We Know It, it's basically all that we had from all the years of working together, and hundreds of babies born that way. But again, we didn't have computers. We didn't have kind of organized system of counting what was happening, how it was happening. So we don't even know how many babies were born that way. When I was working on the film, we put our heads together. I'm still friends with all of those midwives that were there at the Black Sea. And we had a little brainstorming party trying to figure out how many babies were born unsuccessfully, because all the years kind of blurred together. And also it was in a few lagoons, and we couldn't really remember which baby was accounted for and not accounted for. It's just impossible to tell right now, because we were so really involved and kind of high on doing what we were doing. Nobody thought about keeping track or doing some kind of office work, some kind of equivalent of office work. It just didn't exist at that time.
Were you in the camp off and on for that whole 6-year period?
Well, yeah, I was. Some of the camps, I was even the one who chose the location, because it was in different places every year. And I was basically there from end of May to beginning or mid-September, depending on the weather. And it was beautiful. Life in those camps was just so amazing. If you heard of Burning Man, it was kind of that plus births. Yeah. It was fantastic.
How do you know of any of the children now that were born in the camps? They would be probably in their late 20s or 30s, I suppose.
Well, starting in 86, yeah. And a lot of them I'm staying connected with, like Tatiana Sargunas, the midwife in my movie with a bandana on her hand that gives birth alone in that plastic plexiglass.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, she was just amazing. And I know that everyone I've spoken to that have watched Birth into Being have all commented on her Zen-like birthing. It was just unbelievable to see that.
Yeah. So all her 4 children had babies now, and they all gave birth amazingly well, fast, easy. She was actually at all 4 births, and they're just beautiful, incredible, creative, healthy people. And it's just beautiful,
Yeah.
It is all visible. Sometimes doctors are asking me, how do you know it's beneficial? Well, I just say, look at them. Just look at them.
Yeah, exactly.
By looking at them, you can see that they're just so bright and so vibrant. And it's not like they don't have any problems in life. They live in Russia, that means that every area of life is full of problems. But not only in Russia, it's just life is life. We're not free from life's challenges, but the way we meet those challenges, the way we are able to navigate, the way we run our energy while we're living our life, that's a big difference. But also in the hierarchy of challenges, there are also challenges that are inspiring and creative and propelling you in your personal spiritual evolution. And there are challenges that are just challenges, hardships that don't really inspire you to search higher grounds.
So looking into your personal journey going upon your birth, I'm just reading here in your bio on your website that you were in the US when you became pregnant, and then from then on this is where you've built up and created Birth into Being, then Birth as We Know It.
Actually, I was already pregnant when I came to California for what I thought would be a short visit. I had my ticket back. I was just coming to visit, being pregnant. But 5 days after I landed in America, the whole Eastern Bloc collapsed. The whole part of the Soviet-affected countries kind of exploded, and the Berlin Wall fell, and life as I knew it completely collapsed. And it was very intense and difficult times. When I called back, my mother was begging me not to come back. And here I was in this cosmic irony situation, going through everything I'm teaching women not to do while pregnant, not to be alone, not to be completely torn out of everything they know. And I was in America completely hanging in limbo. I didn't speak English. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have a place to live. My visa expired right away. And my mother was screaming on the phone, "They're going to start civil war any minute now. Don't come home. Stay there." And kind of, I was crying every day because I was hearing reports that my friends were at the Red Square stopping the tanks with their bodies. I don't know if you know any of this, if you had it in your news. It was really intense. And the whole mess started literally a few days after I left the country. Is
this what they coined the Iron Curtain? Is that right?
Yeah. So the Iron Curtain collapsed, exploded, and everything kind of was buried under the rubble, under the debris. And for the next 10 years, it was really extreme civil war in Russia that was not reported on the media. It was basically the war of mafias. And we lost a big percent of the male population because, when there is no police, no army, no ruling class, basically, nobody knew who was in charge, who was not in charge. The country fell apart, and it was taking toll on people. It was not a safe place to go back. I understood that, even though I was completely heartbroken. But also the father of my daughter was killed, but not before he separated with me. So he didn't want a baby. It turned out that I was completely on my own, without any support, without any village to raise the child, without even a place to live.
English too would have been a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, I did speak English. So I am actually in the process of writing my autobiography. And that would be definitely one of the very interesting chapters, how I survived in America pregnant on zero budget, zero language. It's kind of a social experiment. But now looking back, I see the absolute perfection of that.
Yeah.
And everything played into inspiring me to do this work. And it's a very big story. I can't even, outline the beginning of it in the format of the interview. But to make a long story short, in order for me to kind of legalize my child, I walked into the hospital, and when a baby is born in the hospital in America, they automatically give the child, gave in those days, a birth certificate that made her an American citizen. So then I was at least, a mother of American citizen. I had some kind of legal grounds because my visa expired pretty immediately, and having the world collapsed behind my back, I didn't even have anything to go back to, and it was a very difficult situation. When I think about everything I went through, I truly don't even know how I survived. It was like, how do you survive in one piece? And not only I was completely unharmed the whole time, I didn't skip too many meals. Of course, there were days when I was completely hungry, but I was always safe. I was just making friends as I went, and people were opening their hearts, their homes, to me, and it's just, I kept manifesting bigger and bigger circle of friends and support system. And
it's truly reflective of, the births that we have teach us the lessons that we need in life, and it seems your work now can come from such a place of experience.
Yeah. So I gave birth in the hospital vaginally, even though they were trying to do a C-section. The moment I walked in the emergency room, they tried to prepare me for C-section, and I had to fight my ground, not to be sent into the operation room. They couldn't even understand why I was resisting it. But with having to fight with the head nurse, I completely closed my cervix. At kind of the stress level, I had to start over again, even though I was pretty open by the time I walked in. So it was difficult birth, but I ended up giving birth vaginally, and again, it's a long story.
Yeah.
But to bring out the topic of limbic imprint, you see, when we're living before we neutralize our original limbic imprint, we kind of have tendency to replicate the circumstances of our arrival to this planet in our own life. For example, if, say, a man was drinking a lot when the mother was pregnant, then if it's a baby girl, then she would have a tendency to be attracted to men who like to drink. It's kind of works directly almost. So with my story, while I was organizing all this water birth movement in Russia, I actually never went through the training myself. I was kind of the person behind the scenes and making sure that everything is happening for pregnant women, but I was not pregnant myself to go through that program. I got transported to America very early in my pregnancy. So I played out my situation of gestation that my mother went through, because when she was pregnant with me, they lived with my grandma. And when my grandma found out that they were pregnant, she kicked them out. Exactly in the beginning of pregnancy, it's like 2 months.
Yeah.
So I completely replicated loss of home at the same time in pregnancy as she had that experience. And then I can go on and on how the story of my formative period was playing out in my life. So I am not speaking it by reading some books on prenatal psychology. I lived every step of it. And my work is now the result of my efforts and constant research and noticing the patterns, what's effective, what's not affecting. It's my flight for freedom. It's my desire to free myself from this hypnosis, from this imposed conditioning that is not part of who I truly am. It's my healing of my birth trauma that guided me every step. And then I was just paying attention and learning how to transfer what worked for me into some processes and exercising for other people that they would have the same effect. So it's kind of my other baby is this birth into being method that I'm crafting diligently since 82.
Wow. I just reflecting on my own journey again, when you were saying that, I feel too that the more I expose my journey and the more awareness becomes, the more I transform, and the more I do, aligning with these podcasts, with what I'm doing, it seems like they're transforming my journey and my healing. And this is all just from experience. And I completely resonate with experience. I feel that is it. The experience creates our lives, and it finds that pathway to that universal love from experience. We have these journeys to learn. Just looking, are you still running courses, facilitator training? How's that working out?
I was running, the last few years, I was running only one course per year in Germany. It was very big group every time, and it works much better with my schedule just to do it once. My next course is in 2 years, in August of 2018, also in the same place in Germany. But in the meantime, I've trained so many beautiful people, talented facilitators to do this work, and they're offering it now in 22 countries in all major languages. So I am very happily allowing myself to take a break to write 4 of my books that I started 15 years ago and never had a chance to finish because I was at least 10, 12 countries per year offering my trainings for years and years and years, since 2004. But that did not allow me to put the books together. So now I really put a lot of effort into clearing my time until August of 2018 and see how many books I will be able to finish by then.
Great. I look forward to it. And just in terms of Australia, you've trained Nicole Moore, who I've just recently done a beautiful story with. Is there any other people in Australia that...
Yes, Melissa Schultz.
Yeah, that's right, Melissa, yes.
She's in Cairns. Both of them are fabulous facilitators, amazing, beautiful women. I am deeply honored that they chose to study with me and took the torch and now are available for even private one-on-one Skype sessions if somebody is not able to travel to the workshop. But we also have quite a few facilitators who are available for private Skype sessions.
Beautiful.
So, they're all listed on my website, and all the workshops that are upcoming pretty soon are also listed on the website.
And that's birthintobeing.com, and downloadable DVDs and resources too, which is fantastic.
Yes, there's lots of interviews, audio, video on the site. It's quite extensive. Lots of articles, photographs, and I'm very happy with the site too.
Yeah. And some beautiful dolphins on the front page, which I love.
Yeah, we don't go anywhere without our dolphins.
Yeah. And just to end it off, what would you say, or what would you feel you'd like to say, and especially to someone that's pregnant with their first baby and is not really sure that where they want to go with it, or they've got a feeling and they're exploring their options? What would you say, especially to those first-time mamas?
Yeah, for pregnant women, there is just the biggest thing I can say is connect with your baby. Listen to your baby, find a way of tuning in and really finding a way of kind of open line communication, because even though the body's still forming and is very small, the soul and the spirit are already in there and they're fully available for you to connect with them. And it's an incredibly enriching, rewarding, guiding experience, and that baby will help you decide what kind of birth they need, what kind of food they want you to eat in order for their optimal health. They are completely able and willing to communicate and support you. And there is so much learning that can happen for any pregnant woman if she's in direct connection with that place from which the baby is coming from, because they're kind of in both worlds right now, and from where they are, they have a much bigger picture that they would be absolutely delighted to deliver to you. Yeah, and another piece of advice for pregnant women: do your research. Don't just trust whatever somebody says. Do your research. There is enough information out there to really allow yourself to find something that you will deeply resonate. I was never promoting water birth, even though that was my original focus, and that's how I came into this work. But ever since I saw the bigger picture, I realized that water birth is really great, but only for those women who resonate with that element. Because other women resonate with different elements, maybe with fire or earth, and maybe they want to have natural birth, but somewhere, not in water, maybe in the forest or in the bedroom, or it doesn't matter where. What matters is how much consciousness they're bringing into the process of making that child from the moment of conception. How they want to conceive and how they want to deliver to this baby that sense of safety and nurture and welcoming, and that this world is the right place for them to be. This is the main message that the mother can deliver to the baby, so the baby's body can really build itself properly, when everything will unfold perfectly at the right time to its ripeness. Because when the mother goes into stress mode, the building of the baby's body go on hold. There is a pause in that process every time the mother stresses out.
It just, again, I keep going back to that connection within and that consciousness, and once we tap into that, then doing our research, we can look at things as a whole and not single out this water birth versus hospital birth, or this versus this. It becomes an approach where you feel guided by your intent and your baby's intent, and looking at it like that, it's a beautiful path without feeling fear or you're doing the wrong thing, and tapping into those stress hormones again.
Yeah, exactly. And if some part of you is really scared of giving birth, and you don't really have a way of finding the way of retraining your nervous system and completing that task of preparing for natural birth yourself, home birth, then it's totally fine. If you feel more relaxed with the idea that you can just go and have C-section, then stay with that. I'm not saying C-section is bad. I'm saying that if a woman is feeling terrified of birth, it is a much safer way for her to have C-section. Because if she's really terrified and feeling this peer pressure to have a home birth, then it's a setup. She's bound to have complications. There is no expert out there that knows this baby's agenda. This is the main thing, that when we talk about birth, we kind of forget that there is also another big player in that game. It's the baby. And there is no such thing as accidents at birth. From everything I know, I can say it with my full, authority. Birth and death, there are no accidents. We're born exactly the way our soul's agenda requires.
Yes. And I feel I have spoken to a few previous people in the podcast that have said the exact same thing, and just in a different light. We have the births that we need to have, and it's all preconceived in a sense. Like you said, nothing's an accident or coincidence.
Yeah, because the mother doesn't really have a way of knowing what lessons are here to be learned by her baby. What what's their soul desires, right? So we can only make choices that feel right for us, but when we are connected with the baby, we can again see the bigger picture and make choices from that surrender and allowance to participate in that bigger picture.
Just before we finish up, one more question. We were talking about water and in California where you're residing at the moment. And do you know much into conscious water and or the term living water? Do you have a connection with water still in your life?
Oh, yes. 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 Most of my most valuable pieces, ideas, and best things I ever thought of came when I'm in water, like taking a bath or swimming in the ocean. And I had amazing insights and spiritual experiences when I'm immersed in the water. I feel the water like a living consciousness, like a living being. Very strong connection with it.
Yeah, it's amazing the sort of imprint that the water can carry through us, and I feel like it has such a strong force in our clearing and our channeling and our flowing and into the beings that we are and our learnings from the water's imprint and the consciousness. It's I've found that very powerful in my life too, and very aware of water now.
We are 60, 70, 80% water, depending on our age. The older we get, the drier we get.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Actually, there is a concept that's why we get older, because we kind of dry up. Yeah. So if we have certain water saturation, the body is much easier to rejuvenate and restore and mend itself. And just the juicier we are, the healthier we are. So that water is most of us. It's the bigger part of us. Just water.
Yeah.
How can we not connect with it?
Thank you so much, Elena. I just appreciate it again, and thank you for coming on the show. And I hope that a lot of people will resonate with a lot of your work, and we can make some connections here in Australia. Any plans to come back to Australia to say hello, or?
Not anytime soon. Yeah. I know that in 2018 I'm going to Europe, and then maybe after that I would start planning Australia. But at this point, I don't have it on my schedule, unfortunately. I love Australia. I love New Zealand. I used to go there every year for like 5 years. I was there spending winters there and teaching workshops in different parts of Australia, in Perth and Brisbane and Melbourne and Sydney. Melbourne was kind of the most of it. But at this point, I don't have it on my schedule.
Hopefully one day we might see you here writing some chapters of your book in a lush forest somewhere.
Yeah, I would love that.
Thank you, Elena.
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to connect with people that probably I wouldn't connect any other way. Yeah. So thank you.
You're welcome. Did you connect with this episode? Then head over to our website, circleofbirth.com. There you'll find show notes, pictures, resources, and potentially connect with today's storyteller. Don't forget to sign up to be updated with new empowering episodes and content. Help the show grow by contributing a tip in the jar to make sure we can continue to better the podcast and connect more and more to the wisdom of birth and each other. Hey, and don't forget the iTunes rating. This has been another episode of the Birth Share Project. We breathe, we birth, we empower.